The Bad Batch has already answered two Order 66 related questions that I've received often over the last few years. Did the Bad Batch carry out Order 66, and did Cut Lawquane? The answer is no on both accounts, and today I want to talk about why. Full disclosure, I'm going to 100% be overthinking things, especially when it comes to how Order 66 actually activates in a clone, but whatever, let's dive in. I think the Bad Batch and their relationship with their chips is pretty cut and dry. Their various mutations allowed them to overcome their chips' programming. It sounds like the chips still activated but only affected Crosshair, so why is that? Is it because he was already kind of the jerk of the group? Is it because his mutations weren't as extreme as someone like Wrecker? Right now we don't know for sure. But what about someone like Cut? A regular clone with a fully intact chip that we see has not been removed in the second episode of the series. Why didn't his activate? People have been speculating that it's because he never heard the words Order 66 from Palpatine or over comms. That makes sense. I usually see Palpatine's little murder calls as an illustration to the audience, just so we know for sure what's about to happen. I don't think he called up every clone commander individually to activate their chips. That's a lot of calls to make, but it helps us to see it happening. Crosshair didn't have to hear the order directly from Palpatine for his chip to activate, he just heard it over comm chatter. Regardless, Cut wouldn't have heard it from anyone, so it makes complete sense that his chip wouldn't have activated if that's the only way it can be. But like I said, I'm gonna overthink this. It is completely possible that a clone needs to hear the words Order 66 for the chip to wake up, but it also makes sense to me that the Kaminoans or Palpatine could just flip a switch and turn them on. That's way more efficient. Not to mention we have Tup, whose chip activated completely on its own without any sort of trigger word. So I still think it's possible that Cut's chip could have been turned on, but it didn't affect him because there were no Jedi around, except Stas Ali, but Neo took care of her pretty quickly. However, when I look at Cut, the Bad Batch, and Rex, all the clones that we know about so far that have at the very least resisted the Order, I see one thing in common: independence. The Bad Batch were a special unit going on their own missions, seemingly without any sort of oversight. They mention multiple times how often they disregarded orders. Likewise, Rex was under the command of Anakin Skywalker, one of the most independent and creative thinking Jedi in the Order. One of the main themes of the Clone Wars is showing how your experiences shape you. Despite being genetically identical, clones wind up developing their own unique personalities based on which Jedi they served under. When Order 66 was issued, Rex's relationship with Ahsoka and his upbringing under Anakin, and also probably the fact that he knew there was a chip in his head, allowed him to resist its programming for a short time. So finally we come to Cut. He might be the most independently thinking clone of them all. His experience at the Battle of Geonosis, seeing his entire squad wiped out, led him to desert. He went against the very thing he was created to do almost immediately. I don't think we've heard of any other clone doing that, especially so quickly. Cut is a regular clone, but he's still highly unique, and while it might not be the creator's intent, I love the idea that his own mental state and independence allowed him to overcome his inhibitor chip if it was activated. I fully admit that I think it's more likely that his chip never turned on at all, but I also think there is some precedence for a clone being able to overcome his chip through sheer force of will. In the Kanan comic, we see the clone Gray, who appeared briefly in the Bad Batch, do exactly that. And yes, I know the show changed some details of the comic, but this part of its story remains untouched. Gray hunts Caleb down for a while and eventually catches up with him, but Caleb is able to convince his old clone friend that he is not himself and that something is wrong. That's enough for Gray to break out of the spell of Order 66, and he turns on his fellow Imperials to allow Caleb to escape. It's a great moment, and me describing it does not do it justice. Despite the changes made in the show, it is still absolutely worth reading. So yeah, I don't have any definitive answers as to whether or not Cut's chip was even activated, but I really love the idea that the clones can overcome it on their own. Maybe I love it so much because I want to have hope that more clones are going to join the batch over the course of the series, that we can see some familiar faces return to who they truly are, whether they take their chips out or not. But what do all of you think? Is it possible for a regular clone to overcome their chip's programming all on their own, or are they a lost cause the second it's activated? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Bad Batch and Star Wars coverage, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.